Yes, sir, in the back.
When would you expect the Refined Petroleum Act to be passed? When do you think it will have any teeth to it? When will it start to hurt? If the mullahs in Iran were tossed out, would that have a serious negative impact on Hamas and Hezbollah? And so you say the so-called two-state solution is a myth moving forward. What is Israel to do? Deal separately with Fatah in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza?
You know what? I love Jewish audiences because one question becomes 7. It's great.
I wanted my opportunity. Full Monty. Go all in.
Right. And one opinion becomes 7 too, which is always good too. The Iran Refined Petroleum Sanctions Act, it's passed the House already. I believe it. There's a. You'll have to. I've got a colleague. If you want, I can give you a card. I've got a colleague that deals with this day and night. But I believe it's going to probably be stuck in conference. In other words, once the Senate and House have passed their own versions of it, then there's going to be an issue of how to get it out the door. I'm not convinced that it's going to get out the door. The administration is not thrilled over this. What they are more interested in doing is getting involved in what we call targeted financial sanctions, where we would sanction the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, which I talked about, the IRGC, or other businesses that belong to Iran without necessarily putting sanctions on the Iranian people. In other words, having the Iranians suffer as a result of our political decisions, because we're very sensitive about how the Muslim world, particularly the Iranians, would view us in light of, post 9/11 sensitivities, the war against the war on terror, the war against Islamic fundamentalism, whatever you'd like to call it. So, but if it is passed, you could really see, I think, some difference being made within a few months. You would have companies being very fearful of working with the Iranian petroleum sector, and that would even, just the fear of it could possibly drive them away. You won't even need to necessarily impose sanctions. You'll just drive people away from Iran, and have them make a decision. I'm either going to work with Iran or I'm going to work with the United States. 9 times out of 10, these companies are going to want to work with our market rather than the Iranians, by and large. Now, as for if the mullahs were tossed out tomorrow, yes, the pain felt by Hamas and Hezbollah would be terrific. Would that mean that they would be feckless? Absolutely not. I was at a briefing with Ambassador Michael Oren, the new ambassador, Israeli ambassador to Washington, about a month ago, and he cited a figure of 40,000 rockets in Hezbollah hands that are now facing Israel from southern Lebanon. So in other words, even if Iran ceased to exist tomorrow, Hezbollah would still have 40,000 rockets that they would be able to fire at Israel, within a few minutes' notice. And a barrage like that would be extremely. I think it was something like 12,000 that landed in Israel during 2006. So imagine that times 4. It would be extremely painful. Not to mention the fact that these rockets and missiles have a longer trajectory now. They'll be able to hit Tel Aviv, possibly Jerusalem, possibly Dimona, I heard from one report. So these organizations will still remain strong. They've been financed, they've been trained, and they've been armed. But moving forward, after 1 or 2 rounds with these proxies, if Iran were not to be there any longer, I would expect them to be weakened significantly, as long as no other sponsor stepped in. So that would be the key, is just to prevent a new sponsor from coming in. And then the last question of your 7-part question was about
6 and 7. How do we move forward? Now that the two-state solution's a myth, how do you? What do you do? You deal with each one.
Part of the issue might be just acknowledging it. I think is the first step. Quite frankly, we're not. This is not. I can tell you that this discussion right now probably puts you in I don't know, a 5 or 10th percentile of people studying this conflict right now. Most people are not even aware that this is a stumbling block for the peace process. Just to be able to start to talk about it, to get the international community, to get the Arab League involved, to get people to start to say, wait a minute, you know what, Palestinians, I think we need to have you go to your corner and figure out how you want to represent yourselves moving forward before we do anything else. I mean, that would be critical, okay? And then if the Palestinians say, listen, we're happy having West Bankistan and Gazistan, well, then that will solve a lot of problems, or can solve some of our problems. Israel moves forward and tries to work out a separate agreement with the West Bank. I still think that's a problem. You've got 1.5 million people in the Gaza Strip. You got 2.5 million people in the West Bank, and all of them see themselves as Palestinians. All of them wave the same Palestinian flag, and ultimately don't want to see themselves carved up. But ultimately, I think these are issues that just need to be aired for once, because we're just not talking about them enough. It's a critical component of the Arab-Israeli conflict at this point.